Hello readers, here today to talk about The Grace Year by Kim Liggett. I have a lot of thoughts on this book. This is a young adult, I believe it's being advertised as a young adult dystopia, which I have some thoughts on that I'll get more into later. But let's go ahead and start with the plot of this book. The Grace Year is following a group of girls when they are 16, going through what is known as the Grace Year. So they live in this village, I guess you would call it, and with the way the clothes are described, it sounds kind of like an 1800s-ish setting. That's sort of the vibe that you're getting. Everyone's wearing like really long skirts and everything. And whenever a girl is like 15 and younger, they wear their braid with a white ribbon. When they're 16 and go out for the Grace Year, they wear their braid with a red ribbon, and when they come back, they have a black ribbon. Women have to wear braids to keep their hair out of their face, because if their face is being hidden, they might be using their magic. The magic is not really defined in this book. You're just supposed to think that these girls have some sort of magic that they come into when they're 16. This magic can be used to lure in men, steal husbands from wives, and generally cause sexual chaos, which is very interesting. So they are just taken away for a year of their lives to live together out in the middle of the woods. There's a fence around kind of this encampment. There are what is known as poachers who live outside of this encampment, and they wait for the girls to leave the fence, or get out of the encampment, like to the other side of the fence, and they will seek them out and kill them and skin them, and their parts will be sold on the black market. If you die during your Grace Year and your body is unaccounted for, your family will be sent to the outskirts, which is where all the prostitutes live, which it sounds more like forced. It seems like a combination between forced prostitution and prostitution for the sake of making money and keeping yourself going. We don't see the outskirts throughout this book, but the outskirts are discussed a lot. So that's kind of the setup. You're following our main character as she is going through her Grace Year. One big thing to note with the plot of this book is that there was a lot of psychological warfare. That's the only way I know to describe it. You have these girls who are being horrible to each other. You have Kirsten, who is kind of the main antagonist. She wants to get revenge on our main character for all sorts of stuff, and she's just kind of generally a horrible person who thinks she's better than everyone else, and she ends up taking on the leadership role in the encampment and telling the girls, you have to find your magic. You do what I tell you and you can find your magic. And you're trying to figure out, do the girls actually have magic? Or is this something that they're told, or is it like based on really just all this emotion and rage that they're feeling that they can't get out at any other time in their lives because they're so repressed? You don't really know, and you're trying to figure it out as you go. Like, what is this magic that they're talking about? And I liked it and I didn't. The psychological warfare and the girls hating on each other. A lot of people don't like stories where it's girl against girl and it's lacking in female friendships. This book is not lacking in female friendships. There is one significant female friendship, but the girls do attack each other a lot throughout the book. But that was really used to make a point in this book, which I liked. But at the same time, it's one of those books where I was really frustrated with it. I'm like, there she goes again, doing another shitty thing to these girls. So, do with that what you will. The psychological warfare had a point, but it's also like, I'm frustrated and I'm angry that this person is still being this horrible. Something else to note in kind of that topic is the characters themselves. The characters, I feel like, really could have used a lot more work in this book. From the beginning, they feel really overdramatic, which kind of makes sense for the situation, but also was just a little exhausting there was very little character development in our main character. She was kind of who she was and then stayed that way throughout the book. There's this idea of being not like other girls, which is a really overplayed trope that is in this book. It's not said you're not like the other girls, but the character is very much built that way. Our main character just doesn't think like the other girls in the village. She wants completely different things from the other girls in the village. She's the one who's trying to do something different when she's at the encampment. So it really shows us that not like other girls trope while it doesn't say it, which was a little annoying. But really, by the time I ended up finishing the book, I did give it 5 stars. When I wrote it down in my notes, I left it at like 4.5, but on Goodreads, I'm like, I'm just going to give it 5 stars because despite all of the issues, like the little things that I had a problem with in this book, I also really, really enjoyed it. I loved what it had to say. I loved the way the author did the world building. It's a very simple concept. It's a very simple setup for this world, but it says so much about how women are seen and how they are stereotyped and how they are directed through their lives. Something else that I really enjoyed with this book was the language of flowers that was used. So you'll be familiar with the basic language of flowers, where yellow roses are symbolic of friendship. And if you get red roses, that's a symbol of love. And the author took that already basic idea that we have of a language of flowers and really made it its own thing. Like if someone gives you this specific flower, it means they forgive you, or it means that there's trouble ahead and they don't like you, or it means something secretive. Like there's a flower for every kind of emotion and everything you're trying to say, and you can give someone a flower and tell them something without having to use your words. And it was a really beautiful concept, and it was used really well throughout this book. I loved that aspect of it. Something else that I don't usually enjoy in books, but that I really liked in this one, was the way romance was played out. There is a romance in this book. It doesn't take over the story at all. It kind of takes over a part of the book, but that's also not the main part of the book. That's not the main thing the story is concerned with, and I like that the romance didn't take away from that, because I feel like, for me, as someone who doesn't like romance, one of the reasons I don't like romance is because it tends to completely take over the story, which it didn't really do in this case. So to wrap this up a little bit, I am going to do some minor spoilers right now. I'm not going to tell you the end of the book. From my point of view, I'm not really ruining anything. I just have like some little tropes and things that I want to address, as well as the label of dystopia for this particular book in the spoiler section. Again, they're very, very minor. If you're okay with like super minor spoilers, go ahead and continue. I don't think I'm gonna really be ruining anything about the book. So, for minor spoilers, I want to talk about the book itself. So this book, as far as I can see, is marketed as a dystopia. And I don't have an issue with that, but I think that it's interesting the way that's marketed, because I feel like the marketing kind of plays into sort of the conversation of the book itself. I don't know if that makes any sense. But there is a dystopic, I guess that's a word you would use, dystopic element to this book, where it feels like there are way more girls than boys. Girls are really abundant in this world. They're born more often than boys. Whenever you have the veiling day, where the boys choose who their bride is going to be after the grace year, there's like half as many boys as there are girls. That could also be a reason why so many girls die during the grace year, is the girls attacking one another and trying to make sure that they're eventually going to be a bride, because if one of the brides dies, they get to be replaced with someone else. So how many girls versus how many boys are born does feel like a dystopic element. However, the feeling that I got through the book was that maybe rather than being a dystopia, this was more of a cult. Again, we don't really see or know anything about the wider world. We just really know about this village. and girls, their lives are very directed. They can do this thing, they cannot do this thing, they don't have any power, the men run things. And it just kind of left me thinking, like, if this is a cult book, like, the way it's having this conversation, am I living in a cult right now? It just really makes you kind of second guess your life a little bit. But the way it's set up, it feels more like a cult book to me. But I can see why it's advertised as dystopia, and I think that really plays to the book's advantage, where again it's trying to have this conversation of, is this a dystopia or is this a cult? Are we in present day or are we not? You don't really have a way of knowing. And I think that's really interesting. Another small spoiler I want to just mention here is the romance. So like I said, it doesn't really take over the book, just like a certain part of the story. And it's a really popular romance trope. It's enemies to lovers kind of thing, but it doesn't feel, it's not like, oh, I absolutely hate you, to, oh, I absolutely love you. It feels very natural that they dislike each other because of their places in society before they end up coming together. I think that was really well done. It really took its time with the romance. You end up missing out on a lot of it because of the story structure for that particular part, but you can feel that time is passing. It wasn't like an instant thing. It wasn't a flip of a switch. Like, they didn't like each other. They spent more time together and they grew to like each other and love each other. So I just think that was really well done. Again, I'm saying this because I'm not someone who reads romance. I'm not someone who really likes romance in books, but I thought this was really, really well done. So that is all I have to say on the Gracier. Again, I had a lot of issues with some of the structure and the character development, but ultimately I really enjoyed this. I think it's a really important read. I think a lot of people who like kind of a darker YA would really like this book. Even those who don't really read YA like me, you might really enjoy this book. So if you're interested in this book, like, pick it up. I think it's totally worth it. I think this book has a lot to say. Please like, subscribe, be my friend on social media. I post every Wednesday, Sunday, and I'll see all of you in my next video. Bye, friends.